So I don't know if you guys caught the first round of this. Restream has been playing some games with us the last few weeks. But anyways, listen, you guys.
We can roll with it.
This is, episode 68. Lori-Ann, are you pumped about this?
I am pumped for this, and I'll tell you the story about how this guest came to be.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. So this is the author, Craig Stanland, and we're going to get into his life and why he's doing what he's doing now. And we're going to be talking about how to reinvent yourself and in situations where you don't think it's possible. And we'll get into this. We're going to let Craig get into this. This is an amazing book, and I've had some time to speak with this author already. And I'm excited for you guys to get to meet him. So let's not waste any more time, Lori-Ann, right? We'll be back in 30 seconds with our wonderful guest, Craig Stanland. Donnie, roll us out.
Welcome, everybody, to a show.
Welcome,
Life.
Welcome, Craig. Donnie, can we give Craig a round of applause? I don't know if you can or cannot, but there it is. There it is, Craig. Yep.
I love it. Thank you. And I love the intro music. I'm all fired up now. You were talking before that you were listening to Avenged Sevenfold.
I'm telling you, man.
Lori-Ann may appreciate that. Before I get on stage, I've got my playlist.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So before we get into it, can I ask, what are some of the top songs on your playlist?
It is, before I get on stage, it's going to be Thunderstruck, AC/DC.
Yes.
Master of Puppets, Metallica.
Yes.
And War Pigs, Black Sabbath.
Oh, man, I love this. Okay, so I was a wrestler, so before I got onto the mat, it was definitely AC/DC, but the first song in that entire piece was a little Pantera, and this is how I used to get my head right and get it ready to get out there and get myself psyched up and pumped. And it's interesting because, Lori-Ann, you're a professional speaker. Craig, as now an author and a public speaker now. This is what you're doing, right? You are out there helping and transforming people's lives through the story of your own life. And we're going to get into that. And I can't wait to have people hear the story. But I don't think a lot of folks understand, there's a process, right? Even before we go live, we have to pump ourselves up. And it's not that we don't want to do this, but we got to get ourselves right. I don't have a lot of hair. I'd like to keep it shaved, but it wasn't shaved. And it was 15, 20 minutes before the show. And my little ones were here. And I'm like, you know what? I got to get ready. And I went to
I had to do my hair.
Yeah, I'm in my home studio. I'm in my home studio today because we're doing some work at the office studio. I went in the back and I got myself going and I'm blasting Avenged Sevenfold. And I'm like, all right, I'm getting myself ready and pumped. And I just love that I'm not the only one that does that. That's cool.
Everybody should. And I kind of learned that from a long time ago. As a speaker, you start taking acting classes and stage presence. And I actually took a commercial class. And I remember the instructor saying, whatever emotion you're trying to portray, you have to do that emotion at 150%, just so the audience hopefully feels it at 90%. So the music is how I get into that emotion.
That makes a lot of sense. So the music was actually written and produced by my brother, who is a professional recording artist. And he made that specifically for us. And it's funny that you say that, Lori-Ann, because he would say, I asked him some tips one day, and he goes, one of the things I can tell you is that when you're taking photos, when you're on stage, when you're smiling and doing things, you have to exaggerate everything. And he goes, it's going to feel really weird, but you exaggerate your smiles, you exaggerate all your expressions and your emotions, because the way it's transferred and once it's captured on video or film or any sort of photo, he goes, it looks normal, and natural. That's why it's the most perfect photos are the ones when no one's expecting and they're really laughing hard, but it looks phenomenal. When they have this great smile. In reality, they were probably smiling so hard it hurt, right? But in the photo, it looks great. So anyways, enough about that. We're not talking about tips, public speaking tips and photos. Craig Stanland, introduce, man.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So Blank Canvas. I told you I've been getting into this. My own.
Can I just share how he got here?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it's just such a fun story that I just started seeing a few of Craig's posts in a particular Facebook group, and he kept advertising this book and go to Amazon, go get my book. And because I'm a published author myself and I love to get autographed copies, I sent him a message and said, no, I'm not going to Amazon. How can I get my own autographed copy? And, here you go. Here's how to do that. And we just started developing this relationship over Messenger. And I've sent a few copies to different people that I've been able to get. And so when this show happened, and I was, helping us come up with some guests, he just seemed like the right person to invite onto the show to share with our audience. So I'm so excited.
I loved the way that you reached out, because we were communicating, like you said, about the book, and then you kind of send this DM of like, this might be a little bit out of left field, but here's something that I'm doing. Thought you'd be a great fit, and I'm like, you love it. You sent me the link. I checked out a few episodes, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, sign me up. Let's do this.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so glad that you're here. So Craig, just introduce yourself to our audience.
So I am Craig Stanland. I live on the shoreline of Connecticut. I'm a reinvention architect and mindset coach, published author, and a public speaker. And how I got to there, that's going to be the really interesting one that I know that we're going to dive into momentarily, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Nice
that was the piece that got me, the story that really just that really locked me in when I said, well, wow, we meet all kinds of great folks doing this program, and I'm always excited to bring these stories to others, right? As inspiration, as hope, as opportunity to learn. And when I started listening to yours, within the first few minutes, I was like, oh wow. Okay, so this is like Hollywood blockbuster style type, Wolf of Wall Street kind of a story. And I'm like, oh, okay, Lorianne, nice grab. Okay, so let's do this. So yeah, Craig, I think we've kind of held everybody at enough suspense. Share your story. Let's get into it, because this is important as to why you are here today and why this matters and why the book Blank Canvas matters.
None of this would have happened without my story. Hands down. I don't know a path that I would have taken to be where I am today. So in order to tell my story, I got to go back a little bit. We got to go back to, September 30th, 2013. So September 30th, 2013, I was a wickedly successful sales executive for a very large technology company. I sold all the stuff that makes the internet work into the largest financial institutions in the world. I owned 4 homes. I drove the BMWs. I had 5-figure watches. I had VIP status at some of the finest restaurants in Greenwich, Connecticut. I was living what most would say was the life. I mean, I had what a lot of people would say was it all. On October 1st, 2013, I had just walked into my brand new job. I was only 2 weeks into this new job, didn't know anybody's name. Our biggest competitor wooed me away with an aggressive pay package, and I'm setting up my desk for the day. I put my laptop down, I put my notebook down, and I put my phone on the desk, and I see that there's a missed call and a voicemail. I thought that's so weird. It was calling me at Tuesday morning at 8:45. So I put the phone to my ear, and this is what I heard. Mr. Stanland, this is Special Agent McTiernan with the FBI. We are at your residence and have a warrant for your arrest. You need to call us and come home immediately, or we will issue a warrant with the federal marshals. October 1st, 2013 is the day that I lost everything. And the backstory on that was The short story is I self-sabotaged in the grandest fashion that a person could possibly self-sabotage. I lost sight of what I really wanted to do and who I wanted to be. And I got so caught up in the materialism and chasing money and chasing status and prestige. And I had moved so far away from who I really wanted to be and what I really wanted to do. And my identity was so interwoven with those things that when my paycheck started decreasing, I had to fix this problem immediately. And so I started looking at things that I knew better than anybody else. And I knew our partner company's warranty policy better than anybody around. And so I exploited it for my financial gain. I defrauded one of the largest technology companies in the world for just under a year. And it came to a head on October 1st, 2013.
You know, when we were talking about this the first time, Craig, what's interesting is, you know, for those of us that have been in different levels of business, and, you know, some may admit it, some may not, some may have never been through that. But I think almost every one of us come to a point where we find an opportunity where, you know, we can slide a little something in. No one's really going to know. We find it's not necessarily wrong, but it's not right. And, well, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and play stupid, right? I'm just going to play dumb a little bit. And one of the things that I think was interesting was that when I spoke to you the first time, I said, Craig, you knew it, right? Like, you knew it deep down. Like, you knew that you were going down that road. And he said, yeah, exactly. And I just thought that was powerful. And I think it's important that we mention this, because there's a lot of men and women out there in these places where you're trying to build something and you never start the journey with an intention of doing something wrong. But opportunities are always there to increase your status or your speed in that place. And it's questionable. And you can easily go, well, I can play dumb, and then I can excuse that I'm not doing the wrong thing, right? I'm not a bad person. I'm not a criminal. But it's funny because once you start down that path, it becomes very easy for that to get bigger and bigger. And before you know it, you got the FBI knocking on your door.
It snowballs. It snowballs so quickly, particularly when you get away with it the first time, the second time, the third time. Mine was 10 and a half months of thousands of choices made to continue to perpetuate this fraud. And every single one of those choices was made in the face of my heart saying, stop, don't do this. This is not the way for you. And I just plowed forward no matter what. And it becomes a little bit of a hubris. You know, it becomes equal parts terrifying because the crime itself is getting larger and larger. The monetary value is incrementally growing. But then the hubris that comes along with that I haven't been caught yet. It's a very potent and wicked cocktail.
I haven't been caught yet. That's powerful. And just in so many ways. Like, how many other things do we do in our lives? Not necessarily just what you did here, Craig, which is going to be a fabulous example, but how many people are just walking around knowing what I'm doing is wrong. My heart is screaming. My soul is screaming. But just like you said, I just keep plowing through.
And I love that, because I think what's really important with what you just said, it doesn't have to be something that's illegal versus legal. It is just, like you said, plowing forward. If you are working a job that you can't stand, that has no fulfillment, that all of a sudden starts like rippling out to other avenues of your life where your relationships are now impacted with your spouse, with your kids, whatever it may be, with your friends, with yourself. You know, it doesn't have to be something illegal, but when our heart starts speaking and we ignore it, we chip away at our sense of adequacy, and we demolish our self-trust when we don't listen to our hearts. Because our hearts know. They have a wisdom to them that is so innate and so deep, and to ignore that is to really just spit in the face of our self-trust. And that's what I did. I mean, after I had been caught and I was in prison, I had zero self-trust. I couldn't make decisions. Thank God my meals were planned for me. It wasn't like I had a menu to choose from, because I would have had a hard time making that simple decision. I had a hard time figuring out what workout I wanted to do for the day. And that's what happens when we violate that voice.
Violate that voice.
Violate that voice. Yeah. Wow. It's so important that people are hearing this, because that's that comment right there, when you violate your own voice. Now, here's the next step to this. Now, it can happen, and it has happened to many. And so then they find themselves in this place. Not everybody ends up in prison, but there's a lot of individuals that violate that voice, that then no longer know who they are. And then they find themselves in this place of searching. And many times they can just be putting on masks to try to get through this process. When we talk about how you reinvented your life, that's what I'd like for you to get into now, because that's what happened. You went to prison. You lost everything. You lost your wife. You lost your business. You lost your credibility. You lost your money. You lost homes. You lost everything. So it wasn't just about, I lost it all and I was, nothing to go but up. When you lose your voice and you lose your sense of self, that's the part that I think a lot of people get stuck in. And I don't think they have to go to prison to get stuck there. I think a lot of people are in that place. Do you agree?
I 1,000% agree. And what I think is so critically important is, let's reframe this. Let's actually define prison. Because yes, there is a physical prison. That's what I was in.
Yeah.
The mental prisons that we put ourselves in. We are the warden, we are the CEO, we're the architect, we're the designer, we build them ourselves. And so reinvention does not have to involve going to a physical prison. Reinvention is about walking out of our mental prisons and into a place of trust, of meaning, of purpose, of fulfillment. So I think it's really important that we understand that there's more than one kind of prison. And what I'm going to start getting into is it's going to speak to both parts of it. The physical prison may have a little bit more nuance to it, but it really comes down to our mental prisons and how we walk out of them.
And Craig, I just want to add to that. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, yes, you were in a physical prison behind bars, but there's so many people, like, we're walking around in our own prison that we built one block at a time. I can't do this, I'm not good enough. We built these walls, and over time, those walls can actually get thicker and stronger, and actually even like your space, you might have gone from 10 by 10, but maybe now you're in a 6 by 6. And so how do we find that door to open up, which I know we're going to get into, and to start building that self-trust? And I think self-trust and self-love go hand in hand, but I totally get you couldn't even make a decision, that you were so glad that somebody like picked out your meals so that you didn't have to make that particular decision. Like, I get that because, again, like those self-imposed prisons that we all are building and living in.
So there's so many things that you said in there that I absolutely love. I love that you said block by block. And when I started journaling in prison, when I first started writing Blank Canvas, I was in prison, and I was envisioning that exactly what you said, block by block. And the stories we tell ourselves are those blocks. And for me, mine was a silo. So it was just going straight up, and all I could see up, the higher it got, the narrower my view got. And so my world shrunk with my prison, my mental prison. And it became a question of how do I expand that? How do I broaden my vision? And I'll tell you one of the first steps, and I'm chomping at the bit here because you said a couple of things and I'm like, which direction do I go in? But I'm going to go with the first step that I took when I was in prison, and I'll just do it through a way of story, because I think that's the best way to do it, is, so I'm sitting in the Otisville Federal Prison Library. I'm journaling, and I am journaling about, God, I wish I was home. I wish I was with my wife and my cat and my dog. Mind you, she had already told me that she was divorcing me. I wish that I wasn't financially ruined. I wish I didn't make the choices I made. I wish this, I wish that. I was wishing all over the place. And that voice that we're talking about, that voice chimed in, and it told me what I needed to do. And so I started just journaling, and I wrote, I accept that I'm a federally convicted felon. I accept that I made the choices that I made. I accept that I'm getting divorced. I wrote about three-quarters of a page of things that I had to accept. Everything that I was wishing was different, that in no way, shape, or form could be different. I was in prison, not like I can walk out. I had to accept it. So my very first step, and I think this holds true for everybody, if you're in a job that you don't like, you're in a relationship you don't like, you have to accept reality. Because if you're fighting it, you're in a losing battle, because it is what it is. And so I had to accept reality. And the moment I accepted reality, it was a crappy reality, but it was a baseline. It was a place to start over.
Craig, I want to get into that, accepting. So, help our viewers understand, and I want to dig in this a little deeper too. Accepting seems to be a simple process, but we know that when you're in those situations where you have to come face to face with choices that were made, that simple step is not that simple. So let's dig deeper into that. Why does it matter, and where is it that you have to give the permission to yourself, or what is the process that you had to go through and you find that you need to help others through in the process of accepting your own faults, right? We have another coach that we love having on the show a lot, and he talks a lot about no shame, no guilt, and new choices. And it's that process of accepting. I want to hear you get into this. Help us understand, how is that? How did you get through accepting the loss?
Because I was wishing that it was something that it wasn't. And I found myself, journaling is an amazing tool. Anybody who doesn't journal, please, I highly suggest it. It's probably one of the greatest tools that I picked up when I was in prison. 8 years later, I literally don't miss a day. But so when I'm journaling, I started noticing patterns. And those patterns were the consistent wishing for things that were what they were, but wanting them to be different. And I found myself just chasing my own tail. It was just this circular motion. And really, it came down to wanting off of that treadmill. That's what it came down to for me, was just like, what I'm doing is not working. No matter how hard I wish, how many times I write about it, I'm in prison. It can't be any other way. It is what it is. And for me, that's how I came to it. And, it sounds so simple, but it really is very challenging, because we have to oftentimes, if acceptance was easy, everybody would be doing it. But we have to accept the things that we don't want to accept. We have to admit the things that are going to hurt to do. When I wrote that 3/4 of things that I accept, it stung. It hurt like hell. I mean, it was one of the most challenging things that I could ever do. But when I was done, and this is why I think acceptance is so critically important, when I was done, I actually felt freedom inside of prison.
I love that. Craig, one of the things that I think a lot of people say, stop trying to move forward by looking in the rearview mirror. And I always say, look in the rearview mirror, because that's like the past. Let's learn from the past so that we can move forward. So that's what I'm hearing you saying. I can either keep wishing that I'm not in prison, or I can just accept that. That's almost like looking in the rearview mirror. Hey, guess where I am? Okay, yep, I'm still in prison. How am I going to make the best of this as I move forward?
I love that, because also another component to it was anxiety for the future. So my past was coloring my future. And I was sitting there going, how the heck am I going to get a job? How am I going to do this? How am I going to ever date anybody? All of these unknowns were so much anxiety. And I realized it was because I was living in the past, and I had to accept that past so I could come into the present and then create the future that I wanted to create. So that was a part of my process.
That's great. You know, Craig, I was watching your TED Talk, and in your TED Talk, you talk about the exercise that you do, about writing down what you're holding on to. Is this part of that, how you got that acceptance?
It absolutely is. In the TED Talk, that was specifically around forgiveness, and that's a beautiful, amazing practice. But I find for me, and also my clients also have great success with this as well, is writing it down, and actually pen and paper. Typing can also work, on the computer, but there's something very personal and there's something very visceral about putting pen to paper. It makes it much more real. And what it also does is it gets what's inside out. And from when it's out, that is a part of that acceptance. We really have to, because otherwise just that rumination and that bottling things up, it's going to manifest in a lot of not good ways in our life. So writing it out is one of the best things I can think of doing.
It's so powerful to actually write, because typing is very left brain. Yeah, our logical side, and writing really taps into that creativity side of us. So I love the fact of like writing down. I actually just find it very lethargic also. And I remember the very first time kind of like what you're talking about, Craig, like you just pulled out pen and paper, didn't know what else to do. And that was exactly what happened to me. And that was like back in college. Although my journaling habits, I would say, have changed through the ages. But the whole thing about forgiveness, because we're humans. We are humans having a human experience, and we're going to make mistakes. We're here to learn our lessons, and not to, and I also think that we as human beings, like, we're so hard on ourselves. Like, I bet you, like, your friends said different things to you than you said to yourself.
Oh, absolutely. None of my friends judged me poorly for this. Nobody judged me poorly. I, on the other hand, I love that shame and guilt were brought up. Those were my mental prisons. Those were completely the things that I struggled with. And forgiveness is the path through that. Self-forgiveness is the antidote to shame. And again, coming back to that writing, it all comes down to, for me, it was just one of the most important things that I've ever done, was writing it out and really seeing it come out and seeing those patterns develop in journaling. Because I think that's what's also incredible about journaling. You do it long enough, there are going to be your peaks and valleys, and they're all going to be running on very similar themes. And then when you start seeing those themes, then you can start taking action on it, understanding what is underlying those themes, what is driving those themes. So I love that.
Yeah. Nice. I don't know. Like,
normally, normally I'm excited about this guest and about you, Craig, and I'm trying to give Lorianne a little bit of a chance. I normally hog the mic, so I'm like trying to be good, and I'm waiting, and then Lorianne's kind of like, well, wait a second. She's almost like kind of waiting for Rigo to interrupt me. So.
And I'm wondering what's going on in your brain. I'm like, what do you got?
I'm thinking about quite a bit. I was also working on the back end, because when you go live, you have all kinds of wonderful folks that try to throw garbage in your chat. So I was doing my job at protecting the quality of our program, because my producer needs to focus on keeping us running. And so I was taking that time, but I'm just listening, Craig, and listening to this process. First off, there was a question about the book, if it's on Audible. It's not Audible, but it did put the link in. It is available through Amazon. I dropped that in there for those of you guys who want to grab it. It's really an affordable book, and I'll tell you what, it's a great read. It was written really well. So you start to reinvent yourself, okay? So first step in this process, essentially what you're talking about is forgiveness, right? So accepting who you are and the situation you're in. Excuse me. But when I listen to this, in order to accept where you are, you have to accept who you are. It doesn't mean you have to accept to stay there, right? You don't have to be okay to stay there, but you have to be willing to forgive yourself, accept who you are right now in this place, and decide where you're going to go and who you're going to be next. Take me through that journey. And am I off in that process for you? Am I off, or was that it?
You're running parallel. You're almost there. And I think what I'm about to say is going to be, we might be saying the same thing, but differently. Self-acceptance was almost for me the final step, if you will.
Okay.
To be able to get to that was accepting responsibility. So it first was accepting reality, then it came to accepting responsibility. And what that looked like for me, let's go back to the Otisville Federal Prison, because that's where half of this happened. I'm journaling again, and I'm thinking about, the fact that the prosecutor lied at sentencing, that the FBI made mistakes on their report, all of these little minute details. And I was thinking, boy, I shouldn't be here because of that. My sentence shouldn't have happened because of these things. And again, that intuition, my heart chimed in and it said, wait a second, you knocked the first domino down. Nobody else. The buck stops with you. Because the fact of the matter is, had you not knocked that first domino down, had you not made the choice to commit fraud, the prosecutor wouldn't know who the hell you are. The FBI wouldn't know who you are. It all came down to me. And again, inside prison, it stung, but I gave myself freedom. And then accepting responsibility transformed into, and I think this is where you were going, was accepting responsibility for my life. It came down to, this is my life now. What am I going to do with it? I'm responsible. And I had that baseline from accepting reality. Now I've got responsibility for my life. That led to the third step, which was accepting choice. And it's funny, when I didn't realize that they were all, I call them now my 3 A's, but I had no idea that I was doing it. It wasn't conscious to me at the time. It was after I was out of prison, working through the book, I was like, oh, wow, look at that. There are actually 3 levels of acceptance that I had to go through. And those were my 3 steps. But accepting choice was understanding that literally everything I do is a choice.
Yeah.
Everything. I don't have to do laundry. I choose to do laundry. Choosing to commit fraud, choosing not to commit fraud. Everything is a choice. And that was so liberating, a little bit frightening, because there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that. But when I realized that everything is a choice, it then opened up such an avenue for me to really start reinventing my life and to take that responsibility. There's a very important flip side to that, is every choice has a consequence. And to understand that and to take a step back from a significant choice. I choose not to do laundry. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to have a pile of clothes.
Yeah.
No, other things are going to have a lot bigger consequences. But those first 3 steps were what really started reinventing. And then that went into, Lori, I love Lorianne. I love you said self-trust and self-love. I started creating. I realized, I said, if I'm going to, I destroyed everything. I burnt it to the ground. I have to rebuild from scratch. I have to reinvent from scratch. And I said to myself, I was like, if I'm going to be building, how do you build anything? Well, you start with the foundation. I need a foundation. What is my foundation? And now my foundation is, I trust myself. I am worthy. I am enough. I love myself. And I accept myself. It's 5 components. And so I had to work through each one of those, and each one led to the other.
I was about to ask that. Did you have to, were those steps in a particular order? Because I could see that there's a way where you could have to do one of the other first. Maybe it's I have to love myself before I can trust myself, or I have to trust myself before I can be worthy. Like, I can't imagine those all just go like, all right, I got all 5, we're ready to go, right?
And they don't happen instantly either.
Yeah, like, talk us through that process.
It took years. Honestly, it took years to get to that. And I love that you just said that, because it's not, they had to, for me, happen in a certain order. So I started with, my friend Kamal Ravikant wrote an amazing book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends Upon It. And in it, it's way more to it than this. But the premise is just say, I love yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and say, I love myself. I love myself. And I tried doing that. And I couldn't, because I didn't trust the words that were coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
And I also didn't feel worthy of that love. I didn't feel that I was enough. And if I don't do any of those things, I certainly don't accept myself.
And then you're just like, yeah, like, this is all baloney. Like, the whole, speaking out, you're like, it doesn't work. I don't care. Like, yeah.
It was phony. It was false. It was falling on deaf ears. I was like, I love myself. No, I don't. I don't trust myself. I can't choose what workout I'm going to do. I'm going to sit here and say, I'm going to believe myself when I say I love myself, something that heavy and that powerful. No. So I had to build that self-trust. And a huge component of that was forgiving myself for what I did.
Okay. And so the forgiveness came from the acceptance of those 3 initial steps, right? And I want, if you can, bring those back to us again, because I want to be able to highlight those again. So step 1 was
accepting reality.
Reality. 2, responsibility.
And 3, choice.
So reality, responsibility, and choice. It was accepting of those 3 situations, right? And I'm assuming this process happened daily, sometimes hourly, maybe even by the minute, depending on the day, right?
It absolutely did. And huge thing that, it's like almost like an elephant in the room that the audience isn't even aware of. The shame that I felt behind all of this was so significant that I started planning how I was going to end my life. And I was really fortunate that a very timely visit from my best friend of 30 plus years showed me that I had worth and value outside of what I had always thought had given me that worth and value. And so when I started going through those first 3 steps, when I started building my foundation, there was still a giant veil of shame over me. And I realized that shame was going to rule my life forever unless I did something about it. We talked about those mental prisons. That, I think, is the absolutely deepest prison that we share in our human experience, is that deep level of shame. And so I started thinking about how does shame exist? How does it live? Well, it lives and breathes in the dark. How do we then navigate that shame? We shine a light on it. How do we shine a light on it? Start sharing our story. We start saying the things that we don't want to say. Start being vulnerable and practicing that. So I started doing a little bit more of that in my writing. And I'm still thinking about that self-trust piece. And this all interweaves, and Lorianne brings me to public speaking, was, all right, I got to share my story. And I have to conquer my biggest fear. My biggest fear is public speaking, right? So now, to build that self-trust, I started realizing that self-trust is developed when we make and keep commitments to ourselves. We make and keep commitments to ourselves over and over again. We become the person who does what they say they're going to do. We can rely on ourselves. And a very important delineation of self-trust, I think a lot of people think that it is the faith that everything is going to work out okay. That's not self-trust. Self-trust is the deep, innate wisdom that regardless of how things turn out, you're going to be okay. That's self-trust. And that's a massive, massive difference. Things go sideways, you know you're going to be okay. It's going to suck for a little bit, but you know you'll be okay. So back to that shame, back to sharing the story, back to fear. I get out of prison and I start Googling public speaking. And this club keeps showing up, Toastmasters. And for some reason, I didn't like that answer from Google. I ignored that answer from Google. And I would, let a month go by and I'd do it again and Toastmasters pops up and I still don't like it. And finally I said, I made a commitment when I was in prison to conquer this fear. I have to do it. So I found a meeting in Brooklyn that was at a time that I could go to. And I committed to attend the meeting. I committed to speak at the meeting. And I committed to join the club if I had a good feeling about it. And I did all three of those. And from there, I could feel that self-trust getting developed while simultaneously sharing my story and shining a light on my shame and working through that self-forgiveness. So I know that's a lot of interwoven pieces there, but I think it's important to bring them all to light because there was for me a very definitive process.
Very nice. And for everybody who's watching this live or watching the replay, I mean, self-trust, doing what you say you're going to do can be a small act. It could be as little as when you set your alarm the night before and you say, like, I'm getting up at 6 or 5:30 or whatever time that you're deciding to get up, like you get up and you don't hit the snooze. That's one that's one tiny act that you can be like, you can get up out of bed when you hit the alarm and just be like, you know what? See, I said I was going to get out of bed at this time and I'm out of bed at this time. Look, I've got evidence that I can trust myself.
Bingo. I love that you added that because it is small step after small step. And because fear will throw so many things at us, we'll feel that overwhelm. And we conquer fear by taking the big and making it small. So it is, I'm setting the alarm for 5:30. I am getting up. And when you get up, I think this is also a really critical component. Pat yourself on the back.
Yes.
Give yourself a little celebration. Give yourself a little bit of I did this, I kick ass. Because then all of a sudden we're starting to leverage our brain's natural reward system and we get that little shot of dopamine. And we're all a bunch of little dopamine fiends. So now we're going to start looking for other ways that we can, achieve that. And we can leverage that all the way to reinventing our life and creating something new. So I thank you for adding that.
Yeah.
What I think is really important here, Craig, that you mentioned is the process of getting to this area of finding yourself worthy and forgiveness is building that trust. And then really that's what it comes down to, right? Because when we make these mistakes, what we've done is we've broken trust. We've broken the trust between the people that we've offended, the companies, the careers, the family, it doesn't matter. But that's really essentially where the hurt comes from. And like you mentioned, is when we start down that path, way before in breaking little areas of trust with ourselves, and it starts to snowball and it gets bigger and bigger, and we know that we've entered into this area. And so unfortunately, when these mistakes happen, the guilt, the shame, and the blame are very serious because we knew we had broken trust with ourselves first, right? And I just find this such a critical aspect. And it looks like you got something you want to say on this, and I want to hear it. I definitely want to hear it. But I just want to thank you for bringing this back to the attention, because before anything else can happen, we have to establish trust in ourselves again. And I love that you make that mention in that comment. And Lorianne with the aspect of, listen, just say you're going to get up when you get up, and then do it. And then Craig, give yourself the reward of saying, great job, you did it. Now let's do it again. But the thing is the fact that this is how we start the process of trusting ourselves again. That's huge. I think that's such an important aspect for people to really understand.
It really is. And the part that I was jumping on, I'm going to be like so pedantic here, but I think it's extremely important because it speaks to accepting responsibility. You used the word mistake. I think a mistake is putting sugar on your eggs instead of salt. It's very inadvertent, and it sucks when you do it. A choice is something deliberate and intentional. And I think that understanding that delineation, I'm a member of a white collar support group. We meet every Monday night. And a lot of the folks, depending on where they are through their journey, people are like, this shouldn't happen to me because I made a mistake. And some people will live in that. They'll live in that mistake forever. And to me, that is pointing the finger elsewhere. When we understand that we make a choice, that's where we really seize agency over our life. So that's
such a great, yeah, no, that is honestly, that's a great analogy to the words, because you talk about that right in the beginning. Part of this process was accepting responsibility and accepting the choice. And you're right, it's not the mistake, because you're right. Like, I made a cake once actually with salt instead of sugar, if you want to, it was a true story, right? So it was, it was horrible, right? But the thing is
I got so many questions about that.
Right? That was a mistake. They look the same. I don't know.
Yeah,
it was a long time ago. I was young, and I'm sure alcohol was involved at some point. Right? But go ahead, Lorianne, please.
Clothes pink. I've turned my clothes pink in the wash because I threw a red thing, in there.
Yeah. These are mistakes. I think that's powerful. Words matter, right, Lorianne? I mean, words matter, especially in a specific situation like this, where we're talking about pulling yourself out of a situation, taking responsibility to the situation you're in, to the choices that you made. All of these functions can easily just get thrown right out the window when we move to the next stage and we say, well, but this was a mistake versus it was a choice, because we know it. Like we said, you were already giving up your own moral grounds, and you were already crossing those little boundaries that were starting to get you down the path. And then when these choices are made and the results happen, and then you're left with the after effect. Like you said, you destroyed your entire life. So you couldn't say this was a mistake. You may have in the beginning, but then you said, no, this was a choice. This was a choice, right? Okay.
I absolutely did. Oh yeah. I used the mistake word left and right. And It was one of the most liberating moments when I realized that I made a conscious choice. And I think, not to belabor this point, but I think it's important, a mistake can oftentimes lead us to victimhood. Mm-hmm. And when we understand that we made a choice, it could be a terrible choice and have consequences such as going to prison, but I was operating in a sense out of agency because I made that choice. And when we understand that everything is a choice, we really do seize that agency. And I think if we want to reinvent our lives, if we want to live lives that are deep, rich, meaningful, purposeful, fulfilling, having that sense of agency is absolutely critical. And one of the ways that I did that was stepping out of victimhood.
Nice.
Can I ask you a question, Greg? Lorianne, did you have something before? Because he said something.
But go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I'll let you make the comment, because mine's a question. It's going to go in a different direction. Go ahead.
Okay. I believe that
all you, Lorianne, all you.
For everybody who wants to look at your life, if you want to know what choices you're making, look at your life. Look at your finances, look at your health, look at your relationships. You look at all of that and you can tell what choices you're making. And depending on the health of all of those different areas, the health of relationships, the health of your body, the health of your career, will tell you what choices you've been making. Because a lot of these choices, I bet that you're making, are very subconscious choices. Like, I'm going to show up to that meeting just a few minutes late instead of getting there a little bit early. That's a choice. You decided. You can't just say, well, it was traffic. Well, like, you made a choice what time you were leaving the house, actually. So look at your lives, and that's how you can determine, like, hey, I want to make this particular area of my life, I want to improve it. Well, the only way to improve it is to make better choices. So look at it and dissect it and decide, like, well, what choices do I need to be making?
Our lives are a mirror for our choices. Mm-hmm. And it's whether or not we choose to actually look in that mirror. And that comes down to that accepting, reality and really looking at it. One of the things I do with my clients is at the beginning of our relationship, I have them fill out a life GPA, and it's 10 categories that I think make up a meaningful, purposeful life, and to actually grade themselves, to give themselves a GPA, because that is a way to actually see the parts of our life that are not where we want them to be. Most of my clients will put their career at like an A or an A+, then all of a sudden their sense of purpose is an F. Something's a little bit off there. Yeah. They're making some choices that are clearly focused only on one thing. And we want to, I don't love the word balance. I think word balance is overused, and I don't think it's accurate. Harmony. I think we want harmony between all the different components of our life.
Beautifully.
That's a great word choice, because you're right. I mean, things change just like seasons. Like life has different needs, and there'll be times where things are very balanced, and then there's times where they're not, and you can't look at it that way. The harmony, I like that. That's a wonderful way to look at it. So you had made a comment earlier. Now, someone who has experienced prison and then recognizing that these areas of guilt and shame and the reality of what had happened, you said had you in a different form of prison that was worse than the physical aspect of it. And I want to go back to this a little bit, because I think that this was an important thing to make comment on. Because if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this situation and you find yourself in a place where you're unsure, and you know that there's voices that are giving you the gut feelings, or you're going through your own aspect of guilt and shame and not accepting where you are, I think it could be easy to say that you can look at someone like your life and say, I get it, you were there in prison. I don't think people really quite recognize that they could be in a prison right now in their own life that is actually far worse, because it doesn't have the clarity of, yes, I got in trouble, I'm busted, and I'm in prison, because now, you've got the sign, right? You're wearing the letter A, what I mean? Like, it's when that happens, what else are you going to do? You have to reinvent yourself. But you made it very clear that was just one part. There's this other prison that you put yourself in mentally and emotionally and at every aspect. That, I think, is where people can get stuck and not even recognize they're in a prison. They've built their own prison for themselves. Do you see this when you work with folks?
Absolutely. It is the boiling frog analogy. The frog doesn't realize that the temperature of the water is rising. And so people don't realize that they are in these mental prisons. They just know something is off. Big thing I hear from my clients is this all there is? And the mental prisons that show up, we can look out for them through a couple of different ways. Goes kind of back to that accepting reality. If you're wishing something was different, if you are, let's say, professionally and materialistically very successful but woefully unfulfilled, that's a giant red flag. If you are stuck in your relationships with your spouse or with your children or your friends, that's a red flag. These are all signs for the prisons that we put ourselves in. The language that we use, back to what Lorianne was saying, that we're our own worst critic. If we're able to step back and use a little bit of awareness and realize how we communicate with ourselves, that's a prison that we put ourselves into. I suck. I'm no good. There's 9 million things. We say the worst things to ourselves. That's a prison. So one of the things that we want to look at is awareness. We want to learn how to practice awareness. And we want to be able to do that is break the pattern of our normal day, is one of those ways to all of a sudden start changing our perspective and look at ourselves a little bit differently. Is if we do the same things every single day, we're going to get the same results day after day. And wishing that something was going to change from that is like, expecting orange juice from a cow. It's not going to happen. So, you want to want to break the pattern and then kind of come back to this place of neutral and practice a little bit of awareness and be honest with yourself and say, what are some of the things in my life that I don't like? And back to Lorianne's point again about our choices. What in life, where's that mirror? What is, if I'm willing to look in the mirror, what am I seeing that I don't like? And all of those are going to be prisons, and people may have a hard time admitting that they're actually in it.
Oh, this goes back to the aspect of those first 3 steps, right? Recognizing and being willing to accept the responsibility and the choice. And I keep forgetting the first step.
Reality, responsibility, and
reality.
choice.
There it is. I'm like, I guess that's the obvious. So problem number 1, Rigo, you got to remember step number 1. All right. So listen, we're getting ready to wrap this up. Craig, this has been awesome. Lorianne, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of get us, some final words in. And Craig, what I'd like to be able to do is number 1, I'd like our audience to get to know where they can find more about you. I would like to be able to follow you and learn more about how you're helping, but also where we can make the greatest impact to understand how to move forward if we're in that place. Like, what's the first step we can take outside of understanding the reality? Maybe that's it. I don't know. I'm going to give you the opportunity to share that with us. And then, like I said, Lorianne, please give us some final words, and then we'll go ahead and let everybody go, and we'll let you go. And thank you again for being here. But go ahead, Craig.
Thank you so much for having me. And
yeah, absolutely.
Before I get into where people can find me, I think to your point, you don't even realize it. In the beginning of our conversation, you used the key word. After those first 3 steps, even maybe before those 3 steps, use the word clarity. Clarity is the antidote to uncertainty. Clarity is the antidote to fear. So get clear on what it is that you want in your life. And an important delineation of this, because I see it all the time with my clients, is when I ask them that, they go, I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't want to commute. I don't want to do this. They go through a laundry list of things, and they're so proud of themselves. And they're like, I was very clear on what I want. And I was like, that's great. You realize you didn't answer the question. You told me everything you don't want.
Yeah.
And that is such an important thing. So getting that clarity, that's going to be, I think, the most important first step. What do you want? And be honest with yourself. Go big. You want a house in Malibu? Write it down. Then I would suggest, why do you want that house in Malibu? What does it mean to you? What's the story you're making up around it? But that's a whole nother conversation.
Tony Stark lives there.
That's a good enough of a reason.
Yeah, Tony Stark lives there. Duh. Lorianne, little final words.
I would say, this isn't just a good story. One, I would definitely pick up Craig's book and read through it, and really, like, as he's going through his journey, go through your own journey. This journey is one that I've gone through, and one that I encourage my clients to go through. It's that self-love, that self-trust. This is like the one that when people say, like, what has made the biggest difference in your speaking career, it is self-love, self-acceptance, self-trust. I show up, and my clients will even share the same thing. They show up differently on stage, and that's what makes such a huge difference. So this self-love thing isn't some woo-woo, like, new age thing. It is so, just like Craig said, foundational.
I love it. Listen, for all you guys that have joined us today, thank you so much for being involved in this. As always, we ask that you let us know if you like the content and the program that we're bringing to you guys here each and every week. Let us, let Craig know what you think about this as well. Follow Craig right here on LinkedIn. You can find him there. I'm sure, Craig, you have other social profiles. What we'll do is we'll grab those from you and we'll dump them in, and that way you guys can check it out. We will also be rehashing on this and giving you highlights on this particular program in our newsletter. So if you haven't started subscribing to that, please do so. This is where we go back and we highlight our speaker again, the conversation, and we give you the opportunity to see more about our speaker and about how we're bringing this content to you. So you guys, first and foremost, thank you for taking the time with us today. And Craig, I want to thank you again so much for being here, for being a guest on the Contagious Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much. I'm excited for 2023. And I'm excited to see more about what you're doing and how you're changing lives. Again, I'm enjoying the book so far as I've gotten about halfway through. It's a great read. And getting to know you even better has been awesome. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for being here. I want to go ahead and get this closed up. Again, have an amazing rest of your week. You guys, God bless. Thanks again for your support. And we'll talk to you next week right here on the Contagious Leadership Podcast Live. Talk to you later. Thanks again, guys.